about Putin in a recent interview seemed actually to draw an equivalency between American policies and Putin's tactics. When Putin was called a killer, President Trump said, and I quote, "There are a lot of killers. Do you think our country is so innocent?" Unquote. Let me ask all of you, let me start with Ambassador Baer and anyone else who wants to weigh in. Are American leaders killers? Are they the same as Putin? And what does it do for Putin's aims to hear that kind of talk coming from the President of the United States? And Ambassador Bloomfield, as you described, doesn't this erode trust in the United States? Let me start with Ambassador Baer.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. In a word, no. There is no equivalence between the United States and Russia, and our President should be able to state that clearly, as should our Vice President be able to state that clearly. I recently wrote a piece for Foreign Policy talking about the President who you alluded to, Ronald Reagan, and the fact that the comparisons between our current President and Ronald Reagan do not hold up because Ronald Reagan saw so clearly that America's military was strong, but that America was strong because it was our military, because it had to do with our principles and the values that that military stands behind. And I think it's very important that we not lose sight of that, because that is exactly the distraction that Vladimir Putin would like us to submit to. What you talked about more broadly, I think, is what some have called weaponized relativism. This is a tactic that Putin uses to try to remove the focus on the failings of his own regime. And we should be clear that the failings of his own regime are not just international. His regime is failing domestically. He has stolen so much. His cronies have stolen so much. They have failed so completely to diversify that economy. Russia has the birth rates of Western Europe, the life expectancy of parts of Africa, and an undiversified economy. That is not a recipe for success. And as I said in my written testimony, you can't talk to a Russian diplomat these days for more than 5 minutes without having them talk about a multipolar world that we live in. And I always want to say, okay, fine, I'll grant you the premise that the 21st century is a multipolar world. What makes you think that Russia is one of the poles? There is nothing attractive about Putinism as a system. And we should be very clear, even as we take very seriously the threats that Putinism poses both domestically and internationally, we should take those threats seriously. But we should never lose sight of the fact that we didn't get it wrong. The values that underpin American democracy, the values that are the foundation for the NATO alliance, the values that are universal values at the center of the European project are the right values. They are the right prescription for a successful society, and we should never lose confidence in that.
Thank you. Mr. Doran.
Thank you, Ranking Member. In considering your question, I would look directly at the exact purpose of this hearing today. What is it that Russian disinformation attempts to achieve? I think it is very obvious that Putin does not want to make America great again. In fact, Putin has the opposite goal. However, our allies do. Allies like frontline states, the Baltic states, Poland, and others, neighbors of Russia, they actually want us to succeed. Russia does not. One of the things that we have seen is that Russia has field tested many of its propaganda techniques that it is utilized in Western democracies now. It has field tested these concepts and techniques in Central Europe, in frontline states. What we're seeing is not new. One of the points I would stress for the committee is the urgency and the speed at which these techniques are evolving. They're going from laboratory to field test to refinement rapidly. Our responses are slow, our messaging is clunky, and we're combating a highly effective, well-funded effort that does not care about facts. One of the problems we face when we look at facts, when we look at what is true, is that, frankly, Russia is just fine with us stating our side of the debate. Russia does not mind, because the more ideas are out there, the more explanations there could be for anything, the more relativistic interpretations of facts that we and others can put out, this assists Russia in confusing audiences, distracting from the main issue, and ultimately befuddling us into pointing fingers at each other and not keeping the shields faced towards Moscow.
Thank you. I want to ask Ambassador Bloomfield, as you described, doesn't this erode trust in the United States, what our President has done, what our President has said?
Thank you, Ranking Member Engel. I'm not going to involve myself in talking about specific statements. I'll say that President Trump is my president. President Obama was my president. I'm an American. I vote. Elections matter. However, we have a vigorous set of checks and balances. We have a free press. You're absolutely free to challenge the people we've entrusted with power and be challenged by every act that we take in the public interest. So that's perfectly legitimate. That's why we're robust. And look, in American history, a lot of things have changed, from the agrarian age to the industrial age to the information age. This is a time of change. This was a change election, and it doesn't mean politically it was a change election. It means that America needs to adapt. Republicans and Democrats, we need to come together and figure this out, and as we always have, we need to own the future. I would simply conclude by saying—
But not adapt with Russian interference. We want to prevent Russian
we
interference.
need to call them out, but my point is, their center of gravity, their weakness, they are very brittle. Look how much they are trying to— look at the information age. Information is omnipresent, but they're trying to control the media. Russian television never told the Russian people that they had troops in Ukraine. They hid the facts. So they are extremely vulnerable to a reverse information campaign from the West.
Thank you. We go to Eliana Ross-Layton of Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.